I just met this gentleman who was starting a nonprofit, and he asked me, Amber, can you be successful in doing this if you're shy? And here's what I'm going to tell you about that. Introverts have superpowers. Let's discuss. If you are starting or leading a nonprofit as an introvert, you might be anxious about some of the things you know that you're going to have to do in the nonprofit world in order to be successful. Okay, so maybe extroverts are probably going to feel more at home in networking events or big public speaking engagements, etc. But I'm here to tell you, as someone who leans introvert myself, there are certain things that we introverts are good at that extroverts just don't do the same. I'm going to hit on 3 of the introvert superpowers for starting or leading a nonprofit in this video. So stick around to the end. And if we haven't met before, hi, I'm Amber Melanie Smith. I am a nonprofit founder, social entrepreneur, and social impact YouTuber, and I love making this content all about starting and growing nonprofits, social enterprise organizations, social impact projects, and making a difference in all of the various ways that you can. I want to help provide the guidance that you might be needing if you're on a change-making journey involving starting a nonprofit or social enterprise. I have more resources on my website, changemakercafe.com. Don't forget to check that out and join the waitlist for our new Changemaker Accelerator, where you'll get some more personalized support in your journey. Okay, let's talk about those 3 nonprofit leader introvert superpowers. All right, but first a little math, because I don't want you to feel alone and isolated if introvert describes you. There are millions of nonprofits and NGOs around the world, which means there are millions of nonprofit and NGO leaders and change makers like you. And according to Myers-Briggs, like 56.8% of people identify as introvert. That means 56.8%, presumably, of nonprofit and NGO leaders are also introverts, and they seem to be doing okay. So getting into these 3 introvert superpowers that make you excel at nonprofit leadership and fundraising, I'm going to talk about the first one, and that is authentic and deep relationships. I have talked about this in past videos. I've talked about this in my newsletter, Changemaker Mondays, but I can tell you that one component, one key trait of all of the nonprofit leaders who are the most successful that I've ever seen, they all have this one thing in common, and that is that they are really, really good at building and maintaining relationships, because more than anything else, relationships help you succeed. And I'm talking about relationships with all kinds of stakeholders. So you've got your donors, of course, they offer the financial resources, but you're also talking about community members, because you've got to have that public trust. And of course, business and government leaders who might be able to move the needle on other things for you, like policy or large grant opportunities or meeting other people in the space that you need to meet. And of course, your volunteers, who are the heart of your nonprofit. But most importantly, the people that your nonprofit serves, because that's why the nonprofit exists, right? Is to help those people. Introverts are known for leading with authenticity and having those deep relationships. Have you ever heard of that quiz or that website, 36 Questions to Fall in Love? You're like, what does that have to do with anything, Amber? And I will tell you. So if you haven't heard of this before, the idea behind the 36 questions to help you fall in love is basically that if you ask these questions, and they're always deep, meaningful, purposeful questions, right? If you ask another person these questions, even a stranger, that you're gonna form a very strong bond with that person. And these questions are way beyond small talk and how's the weather talk. It's always stuff like, if you could invite anyone in the world to dinner, who would it be? Or what would your perfect day look like? Or what are you grateful for in your life? And the thing about these questions is they really get at the core of someone's values and belief systems. And here's the thing, introverts are really good at asking for these kinds of questions. They're good at figuring out what to ask, and they're good at listening and really taking in the information when they ask, which means they're more likely to form a deeper level relationship with someone they just met in the community who might be a future donor, than anyone else. And when you can build these relationships, you build trust and you build loyalty, two other ingredients that are required for raising money and sustaining that money. All right, so let's talk about some real world application. If you are an introvert and you want to go out into the world and try some of these things to build meaningful relationships, what might this look like? Let's say you have a coffee meeting set up with someone, you're an introverted nonprofit leader or founder, and you want to really build that relationship, but you don't want to freak them out by getting too deep, right? Because it's not for everyone. Your goal here is to ask questions that are going to get at the heart of their values and beliefs that are also related to your mission. So an example of that might look like, can you share a story about how this social issue impacted you or your worldview? And this social issue is, of course, the one that your nonprofit is tackling. Another example might be, how do your values influence your support of our organization or of this mission? You would be amazed at some of the really awesome, helpful, and impactful information you can glean from a conversation with a stakeholder like this. All right, introvert superpower number 2 is kind of related to number 1, but it's a little bit different, and that is listening and empathy. I heard this great advice from a top fundraising expert once, and she said, the most important thing you can do in a conversation with a potential donor or a current donor is to listen. This advice has been repeated by so many other fundraising experts I've talked to since then, but it's the idea of not talking most of the time and just absorbing information. So when it comes to fundraising, which is of course a very important thing you need to do when you're running a nonprofit, listening is definitely an introvert superpower because it allows you to really get to the heart of and understand the needs and concerns and challenges that other people might having, also leading to building empathy, of course. So there's this common misconception that being a good fundraiser means having this perfectly polished pitch or request for support or something like that. But I can tell you, when you're going in for a meeting one-on-one with a donor, that's really not going to matter. In fact, in some cases, it might even annoy the person. Knowing what questions to ask and then knowing to listen and how to absorb information is way more important. And here's why. First, it's going to help you understand donor motivation. Why do they give or why don't they give? If you can understand this and it feels like the donor might potentially be a good fit for funding your organization, then you can learn how to tailor your messaging to really align with what they're envisioning for how they can support your cause. Let's say, for example, you discover through listening that your donor is very passionate about education. Well, in that case, you can tailor your communication with that donor to highlight all of the ways that support could impact that specific area, assuming that's aligned with your organization. In another example, I was having a conversation with a donor and I learned that he actually didn't like to fund direct services or materials or supplies. He actually wanted to fund the business side of the nonprofit, so the infrastructure, the operations, because he understood that when you invest in those parts of the organization, you can actually make a much bigger impact on all those other things too. I know, right? Dream donor. But because I learned that, I was able to explain to him how support could make an investment in those types of things for our organization. Instead of asking him to donate $100 to feed 10 people or whatever direct service or direct material impact that he could have with the donation, I was able to say, if you donate X, we can hire a new staff person and that's going to triple our output and our outcomes on the program side. So learning how your donors think is so important in fundraising. Another reason is, like I said before, listening builds trust and it deepens the relationship. People don't donate to an organization that they don't trust. So you have to have that foundation of trust before you can even think of asking for a donation. Another thing is that listening can help you address a donor's concerns or barriers to giving. Maybe they're not quite sure that they want to donate. Maybe they're interested in your cause, but they have some concerns. When you listen and share an openness to hear those concerns, you can learn what those barriers are and see if there are ways to work with your donor to overcome those barriers, leading to hopefully a donation. All right, so thinking of that real world application, if you are an introverted nonprofit founder or leader, try this. Next time you are in a meeting with a donor or a stakeholder, volunteer, board member, even another team member, see if you can challenge yourself to listen 80% of the time. And then afterward, consider what insights you gained that might be able to further your relationship with that person to support your cause. The third introvert superpower for nonprofit leadership is thoughtful and strategic decision making. Okay, so I've said this before, but creating a social impact is really a long game. Unfortunately, you're not going to change the world overnight. So that necessitates some long-term thinking and the ability to carefully plot out your steps and your strategy to go from here to here. And again, this is something that introverts are renowned for being able to do. They tend to be very reflective and deliberate and intentional in their thinking, which allows them to make some really thoughtful and strategic choices. Not to say extroverts can't also do this, but we're talking about introvert superpowers here. You would normally assume that slow decision making or taking the time to be thoughtful and strategic might actually mean your organization grows more slowly, but the opposite is actually true. Having a thoughtful and strategic plan, especially a written strategic plan, can help your organization grow exponentially faster and more smoothly. In fact, according to the Journal of Management Studies, organizations with a written strategic plan grow 30% faster. And in another report featured in Nonprofit Pro, 86% of nonprofit leaders said a written strategic plan allowed them to get more funding. As Abraham Lincoln may or may not have said, it's debated, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe." Regardless of whether he said it though, the point remains preparation can lead to smooth execution. So this is very important for the nonprofit sector overall because decisions have significant impact on the long-term future. Let's talk about some real-world application. Let's say you are a changemaker who wants to start a program or a nonprofit to help people experiencing homelessness. And you think, I'm going to start a food pantry because access to food is surely an issue that these people are facing. But you are a strategic thinking, introverted nonprofit leader. So you pause and you take some extra time to go out into the world and talk to those impacted by the issue of homelessness. And what you actually learn is that instead of a food pantry, they really need laundry services. So you start a nonprofit that provides laundry services instead of a food pantry, saving yourself years of effort, figuring out what the top needs are, and serving the community the way they've said they needed to be served. And by thinking this strategically, you've saved months of time, like I said, or years, but you've also made the biggest impact possible for those you wanted to help. If the Myers-Briggs math is right, over half of you watching this right now are introverts, or maybe it's even skewed to the majority of you being introverts because you saw the video title and clicked on it. Anyway, what did you think? I'd love to hear if this video helped boost your confidence as an introverted changemaker or nonprofit leader. Share more about your introvert experiences in the comments below. And if you're starting a nonprofit or social enterprise, don't forget to check out my website, changemakercafe.com, where we have resources linked and organized for you, some articles, and of course, some additional resources for you too. I also have my newsletter, Changemaker Mondays, where you get weekly insights and tips on fundraising, starting a nonprofit or social enterprise, leadership, and more. So don't forget to check that out and subscribe. The link is below this video. I'm Amber Melanie Smith. That's all I have for you today, and I'll see you next time. Bye.